Hello friends, today we will talk about Hindu cinema, and the title of the topic is Hindi Cinema a Study. And in this lecture we will talk about the various aspects of Hindi cinema, the origins of the silent cinema in India, and thereafter how the talkies came in 1931, the developments during 1930s and 40s when India was under the colonial rule, and thereafter in 1950s and 60s how cinema became some sort of a tool, and it also contributed to the idea of nation building. Thereafter, a lot of disappointment in the 1970s in the framework that the anti-establishment and the angry young man image of Mr. Amitabh Bachchan, and thereafter we see that the various kinds of developments in 80s and 90s, and with the coming of the globalization, the changes which came in the framework of cinema with the coming of the multiplexes and with the coming of the big studios, and the way they brought about a change in not only in terms of filmmaking but also in the context of film exhibition. So when we talk about cinema and when we tend to understand cinema and how various scholarships they are there in different disciplines nowadays in the context of cinema, and how cinema can also be used as a pedagogical tool, and cinema as a tool where it can be used to understand the society and culture, and at the same time the relevance and importance of cinema where we are able to understand the various cultural practices of a society when we tend to understand that cinema of that particular society. So basically when we say that cinema is also a mirror image of the society, the themes and the kind of trends on which the films they are being made, they also communicate the kinds of ideas which are prevalent in the society. In the context of some of the readings which can be suggested on in terms of understanding Hindi cinema, there are varied kinds of studies, varied kind of books which have been written, but some of the general references which one can use is Firoz Rangunwala's 75 Years of Indian Cinema, Gautam Kaul's Cinema and the Indian Freedom Struggle, Historical and Biographical Films, a Symposium, T. M. Ramchandran's edited 70 Years of Indian Cinema, Aruna Vasudev's Liberty and License in Indian Cinema, Film India and Abhyuday. These were some of the contemporary magazines of 1930s 40s, and the files in the National Film Archives as well as the National Archives of India, which also provide some kind of insights regarding the cinema of those times. So when we tend to understand cinema, when we try to seek the origins of cinema, it all began with the arrival of the cinematograph, and Lumiere brothers, Louis and Auguste, both of them, they were in a way responsible for the invention of the cinematograph, and before that also developments they were being made so that this stage of the invention of cinematograph could be reached. And the first commercial exhibition of cinema took place on 20 8th December 1895 at Grand Cafe in Boulevard des Capucines, Paris, in the basement hall named Salon des Indes, the Indian Salon. And we find that these two brothers and their contribution in the development of cinematograph, and how this cinematograph was sent to different parts of the world. And some of the films which were shot initially, they were and how these films they got exhibited. And we have this kind of a fascination with the moving images, and we find that these moving images were able to stir so many people at the same time. And Times of India of the contemporary times called it as the marvel of the century. And we find that cinema and the films, they definitely proved to be the marvel of the century that way. And in the Indian context, we find on 7th July 1896 in Bombay's Watson Hotel, which was located in the Kala Ghoda area, was organized the first public exhibition of cinema in India. And this hotel is now known as Esplanade Mansions at Kala Ghoda. So we find that if we try to seek the origins in the context of film exhibition in India, we find that it goes back to 1896, and only in 1895 in December this kind of an exhibition took place in Paris. So India in terms of exhibition was not far behind, and how some of the Indian filmmakers from that point of view, or the people those who were interested in the moving images and the kind of contribution they made in terms of making the films in the initial part. Because the first feature film, which is called as the first feature film of India, Raja Harishchandra, which was made in 1913. But before that also there was a film called Pundalik, which has been referred by Firoz Rangoonwala, and he talks about the poster of that film. We do not have any kind of reels of that particular film, but we have the kind of references that such kind of film was made, though it was made with some foreign collaboration, in that sense that, and the people, they were not being they were voluntarily working in amateurish manner, they were not being paid, they were non-professionals in that sense. But there can be contestations with regarding that idea, but definitely Dada Sahab Phalke's contribution in that sense, that he not only made Raja Harishchandra but thereafter so many other films as well. And Dada Sahab Phalke also got some kind of a support from some of the nationalist leaders like Tilak, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, who not only praised Dada Sahab Phalke's efforts, but was also very happy with the kind of Swadeshi films which were made by him. So in that context, that some people like Harishchandra Sakharam Bhattavatikar or Seva Dada, then Hiralal Sen, R.G. Torne, who made Pundalik. So all these people in the initial sense, they were contributing in some way so that the development of cinema could be seen in India. And when we tend to understand cinema or the films, we find that cinema is a very important source, in that sense that it is an audiovisual source. And when it is an audiovisual source, from that perspective, it not only is an important source for entertainment, but also for education and communication. So we find that during the nationalist period, how the nationalist ideas and motives, they were being reflected in cinema, and how some of the national leaders, they also tried to use cinema in their elections, and how also we see in the modern context, and that how the culture, fashion, and the issue of identity, all this is also being reflected in cinema of those times. When we tend to understand the cinema which belonged from 1913 onwards till 1931, we find that these films, they were the silent cinema, and how this silent cinema, we find that it was accompanied by certain musicians as well. Not everyone was silent in the cinema hall. Rather, when these films, they were being exhibited, there were certain people, those who were sitting on the floor, and these were the musicians, and they were trying to communicate some kind of an idea of the films. And we also find that in the initial part we have the mythological films, we have the historical films, and we have these mythological films for the simple reason that when these kind of mythologicals they will be made and the stories they were being known to the people, and when you do not have dialogues it becomes easier when you know the story, and how the epics and the scriptures they were being used to make films and communicate these kinds of idea. And when these kinds of films they were made, then they also appealed to the masses because they had this kind of a religious character. And how this kind of an interaction between the deities, demons and the supernatural powers it took place, it also in a way influenced the people, those who were watching them. And at the same time we find that such kind of a cinema was not censored by the colonial authorities, because colonial authorities were always very critical and always very cautious that what was happening in the context of India. So they were in a way ready to curtail the dialogues, they were ready to excise and in a way censor the dialogues and the photographs which were in any way reflective of the nationalist movement or democratic ideas. So we find that if that was the case, then the mythologicals they played an important role in that sense. And when we find that in these films, even when Ramayana and Mahabharat films they were being made on them, and thereafter serials on television came, and how these television serials they became very popular, and how during the times of the pandemic, COVID pandemic, these serials they were again telecasted on the television, and how they had this kind of a popularity in those times, and the people those who were playing the characters of the gods and goddesses in these serials, how people they prostrated themselves because they considered them as to be the real gods and goddesses. So such was the kind of appeal these kinds of films as well as television serials they had on the masses. Apart from the mythological films, we also find that there were other films like which were made on the life of the Sufi of the saints of those times, like Tukaram, Surdas, Tulsidas. So these kind of films which were talking about the devotional element of the people, and how these people they had some kind of power to perform the miracles, and how these people they were considered to be people who had a lot of respect in the eyes of the masses. So we find that films which were based on these themes they were also made, and we also find that cinema which was a silent cinema of those times, some of the box office hits as you can see on the screen as well: Lanka Dahan, Shri Krishna Janm, Kali Amardan, Sati Ansuya, Ramayana, etc. All these films they were being made at that point of time, and how cinegoers they felt very appreciative of that kind of a cinema. And later we also find that how women they also got an opportunity to go and watch such kind of films, because they were not being denied this kind of an opportunity by their elders, and elders felt that women definitely can go and watch the mythological films, because there were a lot of restrictions on the women of those times, and how they were not coming to the public sphere. So this coming of the women to the public sphere in terms of going and watching such kind of a cinema, and in the later times, especially 30s 40s, we find that how some of the newsreels they were also being shown along with these films. And when in these newsreels we find that some of the national movement leaders, women leaders, they were also being shown, and how these women they also got inspired by watching these women in the public sphere. And we find that when you tend to understand the mythological cinema, so British India was under British rule, and how British they were trying to control the society in every way, that the society does not become progressive in any way, and society remains fatalistic in nature, and all sorts of social problems in terms of ignorance, illiteracy, poverty and superstitions they are there in the society. and the society is not able to grow. So, and they did not make any kind of an effort as well, that the British, they did not make any effort where society will get rid of all these kinds of evils which are there. So, we find that how the audience which was seeing this kind of an cinema, they also had some kind of an infatuation with the myth, and how they were also connected to the worship of the gods and goddesses. They had this kind of a faith for in the divinity for performing the miracles, and that how their problems they will also go away when these people, they will provide them miraculous solutions. So, this kind of an attitude which was there in the masses was also because of the fact that British, they were trying to create such kind of a situation that the society does not grow. And we also find during this time that there was a lot of strict censorship during this period, and how the imperialist government engaged itself in the censorship policy, and the censorship policy was very arbitrary in nature. And the people, those who were investing their money in the films, because films definitely are a very costly proposition, and when one is making films, one also wants to get back the money which has been invested in that particular cinema. So definitely these people, those who were investing their money in the films, they want to make some kind of a profit. And we find that these people, they had some kind of fear that they will lose their capital if they will make films on the progressive themes, or if they will make films on the ideas which are not liked by the British. So, they wanted to definitely invest their money initially in the mythological cinema, and this kind of a cinema definitely was also a manifestation of the growing national consciousness in some way, that how the legends of the gods and goddesses, they were providing an oblique affirmation of the national sentiments against the threatened domination of an alien culture. That how we see that when this national movement was going on, and how the leaders of the national movement, they were talking about certain values and certain ideals, and when films like Raja Harishchandra etc., they were being shown, so they were trying to communicate that there is a parallel to the philosophy of Satyagraha, because Raja Harishchandra was also talking about truth. Similarly, Mahatma Gandhi was also talking about the philosophy of Satyagraha, that how they had to endure suffering with faith in the ultimate victory of good over evil. So, in this kind of a conflict, we find that not only courage, but the spirit of selfless sacrifice was also needed to fight the British. So, that was the kind of idea with regard to the films which were made during this period, and the cinema was also trying to communicate that it was also trying to communicate that the national movement which was going on, and the filmmakers, they were also aware of the contribution which is made by the national movement, and some of them they were also members of some of the political parties, and at the same time they were investing their money in the films. So, they were trying to provide some kind of a message to the people, those who were watching these kinds of films. And we find that the mythological films, they were also using some kind of an allegory and metaphor to communicate these kinds of ideas, and we find that in certain films how the colonial rule was in a way criticized, or the humanist and the reformist approach of the people, those who were associated with reform, that was also being communicated. And in some of the films we also find that the central person, for example, in a film called Wrath, the protagonist of the film was a lookalike of Gandhi, and he was also talking the similar ideas which were used by Gandhi to mobilize masses for the national movement. And similarly, there were other films as well which were trying to show the posters or photographs of the national movement leaders, or some of the kinds of ideas which were central to the national movement, and how these films they attracted the wrath of the censors in some way, that censor authorities did not want that these films they should be exhibited. And as one can say that during the national movement, when such kind of a cinema, which was the mythological cinema, where women, they were also being allowed to go and watch, in which the socialization of the women was also taking place, and at the same time this kind of a message was also being debated at home. And some of the women leaders like Sister Nivedita, Annie Besant, Sarojini Naidu, when they were moving in the public as the representatives of their gender in the freedom struggle, the social barriers were a bit relaxed. So we find that how women, when they went to see such kind of mythological films, and when they also saw such kind of leaders, women leaders, those who were there in the public sphere, then definitely it created some kind of an impact. And Mahatma Gandhi definitely talked about the extension of the role of women, that women, they should join the movement in large numbers. And in 1930 we find that during the civil disobedience movement, large number of women, they courted arrest, they joined the movement as well, and Gandhi felt that the participation of the women in the national movement is extension of their household duties. And when women were part of the national movement, then the entire household, their children, they also got acquainted with the kind of ideas which were associated with the national movement. Apart from mythological cinema, we also find that some of the historical films, they were also being made during this time. As you can see on the screen, there was a film called Pukar, in which the Hindu-Muslim unity, this kind of an idea was also being used, and the film was basically based on the life of justice-loving Mughal Emperor Jahangir. So we find that some of the films which were dealing with the historical trends, it was be seen that these films basically were trying to communicate the lost aura of the earlier times, and how these historicals, they were trying to communicate some kind of the historical developments which had taken place in the past, but the way they took the cinematic liberty in terms of not presenting the actual historical facts, and also providing some kind of fiction in their portrayals, it created some kind of a problematic for the people, those who were talking in the framework of the historical cinema, that how it has to present the history as in toto. But that was not possible. That also one has to understand that cinema is a money making proposition. It is an industry where the people, those who are investing their money, they want their money to come back as well, and in the name of the cinematic liberty, they were using certain kinds of changes in the scripts as well. And but at the same time, we also have to see that despite these kind of limitations, these films, they were able to create some kind of an impact on the masses. And we find that some of the films, for example Sikandar, which was made in 1943, and it was released during the Second World War, and the atmosphere was very, very tense, and how Mahatma Gandhi had given the call for the quit India, and Sikandar aroused the patriotic feelings and the national sentiment. And this film which came, and how when the quit India call was given in the 1942 and thereafter, we find that such kind of films, it was talking about the patriotic feelings and the national sentiments of the masses. And we also see that how this film was banned in certain military cantonment areas, because when Porus was talking about driving out the aliens from Bharatvarsh, it could be understood as a reference to the British. So these kinds of allegorical tools or allegory was being used in cinema, and when Porus was talking about this kind of an idea that aliens or the people, those who are the foreign rulers, they should go away from India, then it could be understood in the context of the British. Similarly was the case in a film called Kismat, which was made in 1943, and there is a song in the film called Dur Hato Hai Duniya Walo, Hindustan Hamara Hai, and this song became very, very popular, and how people they asked the authorities, those who were running the cinema halls, to show it again and again, and because of which there was a lot of suspicion among the British. And this film was also released in 1943, and we find that some kind of investigation was conducted by the British, and the person who was sent for an investigation, he suggested that there is a reference to the Germans and the Japanese, because the song says tum na kisi ke aage jhukna, German ho ya Japani. So the reference was, the investigative officer concluded that there was no kind of a reference to the British in this particular film. We also find that some of the films during this period, they were also exhibiting the cheap and the obscene commercial films, and the films, because they were being imported from America and Europe, and these films were exhibited without any kind of censorship. So there was a lot of concern among the masses that the foreign films, they will definitely are going to corrupt the public morals, and the students definitely will be drawn away from the right path by the kind of cinema representations that were open in nature. So this kind of a criticism with regard to the cinema which was being imported into India from Europe and America was also there, and some of the magazines like Abhyuday, they were very critical of such kind of portrayals, that how the young ones or the youth, they will be driven away from their own path. And we also find that Mahatma Gandhi, for example, was also in a way not very favorable towards cinema in terms of his ideas, and we find that Gandhi's ideas, they were related to the issues of untouchability, women's emancipation, and Hindu-Muslim unity, and how these ideas, they were central to the national movement as well. So Gandhi was not a big advocate of films, rather he was he did not want to watch cinema, and it has been reported by Gautam Kaul that how he only saw one film in his entire lifetime, which was named Ram Rajya, and this film was only seen by Gandhi, and Gandhi considered cinema to be as some sort of a vice, that it was some sort of an evil, and it will not have any kind of a good influence on the masses. And for that matter, K. Abbas wrote an open letter to Mahatma Gandhi that if Mahatma Gandhi will have this kind of an approach towards cinema, then definitely cinema is not going to prosper. So we will continue with the kind of ideas in terms of Hindi cinema, that what all happened in the next decades when these kinds of films, they were being made, and how cinema also got engaged with the idea of nation building after its independence in the next lecture. Thank you very much. Hello friends, in the next lecture on Hindi cinema study, in the earlier lecture in part 1 we talked about the kind of developments which took place with the emergence of cinema, and how the arrival of the cinematograph, the silent cinema, the contribution of Dada Sahab Phalke, and the various kinds of themes in the films, where we talked about the mythological cinema, we also talked about the historical cinema, and the films which were based on themes of history. We also talked about the contribution of some of the leaders of the national movement towards cinema, where we were talking about Mahatma Gandhi and how there were so many newsreels, etc., which were made on the kind of activities in which Mahatma Gandhi was engaged. We also find that during this period from 1930s, 40s, there were so many filmmakers, those who were able to understand the kind of dynamics which were happening in the society, but they were also trying to communicate the mood of the national movement through the films. But as films are a money making position, that way it is an industry. When you are investing a lot of money, you also want some kind of returns. So some kind of a safety was also required by the filmmakers, and there were others, those who were critical of such kind of a cinema, that it was more escapist in nature. It was not trying to communicate the social, political, economic and other kinds of problems which are existing in the society. But we find that both kinds of cinemas, they existed. If on the one hand we had the escapist cinema, but on the other hand we had a number of films which were made by the filmmakers, which were talking about the social reformist themes. Filmmakers like V. Shantaram, they made so many films which were talking about the ideas which were very, very important to the society. And we find during this particular period, when you talk about any kind of references about cinema, then Feroz Rangoonwala's 75 years of Indian cinema, Gautam Kaul's cinema and the Indian freedom struggle, then historical and biographical films, a symposium, T.M. Ramchandran's 70 years of Indian cinema, Aruna Vasudev's Liberty and License in Indian cinema, Film India, Vidya. These are some of the magazines, files in National Archives of India. So they will provide you, these are some of the readings, but there are numerous readings now, because there is a lot of scholarship on Indian cinema and how cinema is being taught in various universities across India, and people are conducting their PhDs and other kinds of research on cinema, so as to understand the society and also the find of connections between the various disciplines and cinema. And as we were talking about that how Gandhi was critical of cinema and considered it to be wise, and there were other leaders, those who were supportive of cinema, for example Tilak, who supported cinema, and at the same time he was also in a way praised the Swadeshi cinema which was made by Dada Sahab Phalke. Lala Lajpat Rai was also supportive of the films which were made, and we also find that Satyamurthy, one of the leaders, used cinema for party propaganda purposes. Then Sardar Patel, he was also in a way very supportive to the cause of cinema, and there was a film called Achut which was made in 1940, which begins with the speech of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, and he was also instrumental in terms of a film which was based on the life of Netaji Subhash Bose and how it could be reconstructed and shown in cinema halls later. So we find that how the national movement was in a way influenced by the filmmakers, in that sense that some of the filmmakers, they were taking themes from the national movement and trying to project them in a way. And we also find that some of the filmmakers, they were also members of some of the political parties as well, or they had sympathies with some of the political parties, and many of the films which were made by them, for example the stunt films by the Wadia brothers, JBH and Homi Wadia, and how Nadia, who became very popular with the Nadia Hunter-Wali, and how we find that the titles of these films, they were also very provocative, and some kind of a patriotic fervor was also in them. Films like Azadi, Hind Kesari, Desh Deepak, etc., they were in a way trying to communicate that the filmmakers, they were also understanding the ground realities of those times, and many of the studios, they named themselves as Hind Mata Films, Indian Liberty, National Movie Tome. So all these kinds of titling of the films, as well as the cinema studios, also communicated the kind of the nationalist ideas which these people imbibed. And we find that when one is talking about the stunt films, then these stunt films, they were also advocating democracy, they were also talking about the nationalist and the patriotic ideas. And many a times in all these films we find that during the climax scenes some kind of a verbal confrontation was taking place between the protagonist and the antagonist, in which the rights of the people in terms of having democracy, that there should be good governance, the idea of justice and the freedom of the speech and expression, all these ideas, they were being advocated, they were being talked about, they were being communicated. And when the film finally ended, we found that the victory of the good over evil and the legitimate over illegitimate, it sharpened the people's desire for freedom. So we find that in many of the films, in the varied themes, for example mythologicals as well as the stunt, these kinds of ideas they were being promoted, and the filmmakers, they were also very aware during this time, and with much kind of an awareness, they were trying to communicate these ideas to the cinegoers. They were trying to communicate the plea for democracy, any kind of ideas which were against anti-fascism, and how women, they can be emancipated. And filmmakers like J.B.H. Wadia, they later communicated also that they were aware of these kinds of things, and definitely they wanted to make that kind of a cinema where they can provide such kind of message to the masses. Then apart from that, we also find that a number of films on the social reform idea, they were also being made, which were talking about the caste system, Hindu-Muslim unity, mismatched marriages. And as I told you earlier as well, that how there was a film called Reth, which was talking about untouchability and social inequality, and how the character of Mahatma Gandhi was shown by a person who played a central character in the film. And this film was later in a way censored, and it was titled as Khuda Ki Shaan, the glory of God. And thereafter there were other films as well which were made during this period, which were trying to communicate the ideas which were associated with nationalism. And we also see that when you are talking about the ideas of social reform, then some of the films which were dealing with the ideas of social reform, for example Achut Kanya, which was made in 1936, and it was trying to communicate the issue of untouchability and the intercaste barriers, and how Mahatma Gandhi had described colonial rule as a scourge and untouchability as a plague. So these kinds of ideas which were communicated by the national leaders, and how films, they were dealing with them in some way, they were trying to communicate the viewpoint of the ideals of the national movement. And I remember a film called Sujata, which was made in 1950s, which was dealing with the same theme of untouchability, and how the progressive ideas, they were also being shown in Sujata as well. So these kind of resonances which we find, because Achut Kanya was made in 1936 and Sujata was made in 1957 or 59, and this was around more than 20 years later this kind of film was made. So we find that filmmakers, they were also aware of the kind of problems which are happening in the society, and films like Kunukku or Duniya Na Mane, which were talking about the mismatched marriages in the society, and the female protagonist, which was played by Shanta Apte. Shanta Apte was tricked into marriage to an older person, and she was aware, because she was shown a wrong groom who was quite young, and she was married off to a very old person, and later she refuses to consummate her marriage to the old person and communicates that she is young enough to be his daughter. And finally, when the old man is not able to decide what to do, and finally he commits suicide. So I am talking about a film which was made in 1937, when divorces were not all that common. So and this film was made by V. Shantaram, and V. Shantaram later also made films like Admi, which was made in 1939, and which was against the kind of ideas which were communicated by a film called Devdas, and how Devdas was some sort of a pessimist film, and how the protagonist got into alcoholism. So, these kind of portrayals basically were trying to communicate that society has to be progressive in that sense, and society has to look forward in that sense, and this is what V. Shantaram's Admi wants to communicate. And at the same time, he also made a film called Padosi on the theme of Hindu-Muslim unity. And we also find that some films in Hindi as well as Marathi, like Brandy Chi Batli or Brandy Ki Bottle, was also made, and which was talking about the campaign against the liquor, that how liquor should not be consumed and how it is some kind of a threat to the homes of the people. And they were connected themes of Charkha, and how the themes of slogans they were being used, and references to Mahatma Gandhi and Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. They were also reflective of the mood of combat among the people. I remember watching this film long back, and how Brandy Chi Bottle or Brandy Ki Bottle, there are so many songs in the films which are talking about Mahatma Gandhi, they are talking about Vallabhbhai Patel, they are talking about these kind of references, where the miraculous powers which Gandhi had, they were also being talked about. And there were other films which were made by V. Shantaram. For example, I talked about Padosi, I talked about Admi. Thereafter, he also made a film called Dr. Kotnis Ki Amar Kahani, which was based on the life of a doctor who is sent to China, and how he is able to communicate that idea of a humanitarian approach during the times of war, and the way he handles his profession as well as life became some sort of an example during this time. But we also find that these kind of films, for example, Dr. Kotnis Ki Amar Kahani was a war effort film, because the British authorities they were not ready to provide the raw materials to the Indians during that time, during the times of war, and they wanted that war effort films should be made. Then only the filmmakers they will be able to get that kind of resources which were required to make films. There were other organizations like PWA and IPTA, Progressive Writers Association, and Indian People's Theatres Association, and all these associations, both of them, they made great contribution to the Indian cinema. The writers, those who were associated with the Progressive Writers Association, they brought out good themes, good scripts, so that when these films will be made on these scripts, then they will be able to do justice in terms of the cinematic portrayals. And how the people, those who were associated with theatre, they came into films, and people like Balraj Sahani, people like Shambhu Mitra, K. Abbas, they were associated with IPTA, and how these people, they also made a number of films as well. We also find in 1950s that there was a lot of influence with regard to the neorealist cinema, and this neorealist cinema, neorealism, was from the Italian influence, which was talking about the day-to-day themes, and how the actors they were used which were non-professionals, and outdoor locations, simple dialogues, and the kinds of issues which we find in the neorealist cinema of those times were the issues which were of day-to-day nature. And these films which were made by the filmmakers, for example, Do Biga Zameen, which was inspired definitely from Ladri Di Bicicleta or Bicycle Thieves of D. Sika, and how the struggle of a person to get back his 2 bighas of land from a money lender was also reflective of so many people, those who had mortgaged their land to the money lenders. And Jagte Raho again was a comment by Raj Kapoor in that sense on the society, that how society was communicating that everyone should be honest, but at the same time when it comes to their own self, then they were so dishonest, and what kind of nefarious activities they were taking place in a society. Then Pyasa was another important milestone in the context of the Hindi films which was made, and Pyasa and Kagaj Ke Phool and Sahib Bibi or Gulam, these were the films which were very popular, though they did not become popular when they came when they were exhibited at that point of time, but over a period of time they attained a cult status, and how this kind of a cinema which was known as the neorealist cinema, and how some of the filmmakers they got influenced by the neorealist cinema. For example, Bimal Roy, he made a number of films which were based on these themes, and some of the other filmmakers like Satyajit Ray, and Satyajit Ray also received Oscar for the lifetime achievement, though he made a number of Bengali films, but he also made certain Hindi films as well. Apu trilogy, Pather Panchali, Aparajito and Apur Sansar were the trilogy with regard to the life of Apu, which was made by Satyajit Ray. But he also made Shatranj Ke Khiladi, which was talking about the period of the revolt of 1857, and so how he tried to situate the situation of Lucknow in this particular film. And he was a great filmmaker, not only in terms of communicating the kind of ideas which he had, but at the same time the way he portrayed the society in its simplest form. That was the hallmark of this particular filmmaker. We also find that other filmmakers like Bimal Roy and Guru Dutt, they also made films like Do Bigha Zameen, Sujata, Devdas, and how these films they became very, very popular among the masses. In 1935 also Devdas was being made in Hindi as well as Bengali by P.C. Barua, and in the Bengali version P.C. Barua was the main lead and K.L. Sehgal played the main lead in the Hindi version, and it was remade again by Bimal Roy in 1955 with Dilip Kumar and Madhubala, and how these filmmakers they were trying to present that story in different times. And this film was also later made in closer to I think 2000, when it was made with Shah Rukh Khan and Madhuri Dixit and Aishwarya Rai. So we find that various kinds of films which were made at different points of time, how they were borrowing from literature as well, and how which was based on novel Devdas over a period of time, and how it was presented in different times. So that was an important concern. We also find that films which were made in 1950s like Sujata, as I already talked about, that it was based on untouchability and the theme of untouchability, and Do Bigha Zameen was talking about the rural poverty and the depeasantization, that how peasants their lands they were being encroached upon by the money lenders, and they did not have much resources. So in a way they will have to go back, they will have to go to the cities to earn their livelihood, and how in the conditions of the city where they will be maltreated, where they will be exploited, they will not be able to lead their normal lives. So that was the kind of a portrayal which was in Do Bigha Zameen. There were other films, for example filmmakers like Mehboob Khan who made Mother India, which was a remake of Aurat. Aurat was a film which was made in 1940, and films like Aan and Andaz, all these films they were made by Mehboob Khan. And when you try to see the kind of ideas which are exhibited in these films, then Andaz was talking about the ideas of modernity and the openness with regard to women. So and how through a love triangle the Andaz was trying to communicate the ideas of modernity, and how tradition and modernity they come into picture. Similarly, Mother India definitely was a remake of Aurat which was made in 1940. But Mother India became some sort of a symbol in the times of post-independence, when in 1950s, when this film was made in 1957, and when this film came and the way it became popular, and how it was trying to communicate the image of India, that how a woman who toils in the entire life, and how her husband is in a way goes away, leaving her with 2 kids, and how she fights in the entire village, and she becomes some sort of a symbol of Mother India, and she is not in a way trying to protect her own child in the last or in the climax, where she to protect the honor of a woman of the village, she in a way kills her own son. So these kinds of ideas, they were being reflected in some of these films. And there were other filmmakers like Raj Kapoor, who made Awara, Shri 420, Jagte Raho, Prem Rog, and he was a great showman. And how Awara deals with the idea of heredity and environment. Then similarly, Prem Rog talks about the issue of the remarriage of widows, and all these kinds of problems, whether the issue of heredity and environment in the growing up or development of a human being, or the remarriage of a widow, they were all relevant at all times. And the filmmakers, they were very well aware about these things, and they were trying to communicate. And films like Naya Daur and Paigam, which were made during the 1950s, and both these films, Naya Daur as well as Paigam, they were trying to communicate an idea that how whether industrialization should took place, whether mechanization took place, and what is the role of the workers, and how the workers, they are to be treated. So this is what the film Paigam talks about, that they should be seen in, they should be given parity in the society, they should not be exploited. And Naya Daur talks about the conflict between the earlier the kinds of modes of transport and the new kinds of modes of transport. So this kind of a conflict between the earlier traditions and the modern kinds of maybe equipments could be very well reflected in Naya Daur. Then thereafter we see in late 60s, finally in early 70s rather, where Rajesh Khanna, he becomes a super hit star, and the kind of mannerisms and the romantic image which has been given. When we talk about the era of 1970s, then Amitabh Bachchan is the one in 70s and in the 80s who is able to dominate the cinema and become one of the most successful superstars of the Indian cinema, and being awarded the star of the millennium. And thereafter his work continues even after that, the way he reinvented himself, and this reinvention could be seen in the 21st century, where roles were being written for him in different films. And 70s reflect the anti-establishment image, and the films which were trying to communicate this kind of an idea, films like Sholay, Diwar, Dawn, etc., all these films which became very, very popular. And we also find during this period that the middle class cinema and filmmakers like Rishikesh Mukherjee, Basu Chatterjee, and films like Chupke Chupke, Golmaal, Khoobsurat, Bawarchi, Choti Si Baat, Rajnigandha, all of them, they were trying to communicate some kind of middle class values, and they were not only providing entertainment, but at the same time they were also trying to communicate that the society was functioning in a certain way. And these films, they also became very, very popular. And we also see during this period that how parallel cinema also came into being, and filmmakers like Shyam Benegal and Govind Nihalani, they played an important role in parallel cinema, and they were also talking about the issues of poverty, daily life struggle. And films like Ardha Satya, Akrosh, Ankur, Nishant, Manthan, to name a few, because there were so many others apart from the other filmmakers, apart from Shyam Benegal and Govind Nihalani, those who were making some kind of a parallel cinema, and they were trying to communicate that ideas, that how the issues of poverty and the daily life struggle of the masses, they were also very, very important. During the later times, we also find that how Rajnikant became very, very important, and so many dubbed films, and how his popularity did not remain only in the south of India, but at the same time with the dubbed films, so many people could also see the dubbed versions. And we also find that especially in the 1990s, there were a lot of changes in the themes and the presentations, because that was the age where we talk about the globalizations, and films like Tare Zameen Par, films like DDLJ, films like Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gum, which were being made for the NRI audience. So all these films they were trying to communicate that cinema was also very, very glossy, and how the NRI audience and the diaspora in the developed world, the way they wanted to see that cinema. And many of the films, they were showing a lot of brand placements, that how brands they were being positioned in the films. So this was happening in the earlier times as well, but in the later times we find that this kind of positioning, it became more open, in that sense that many times that a particular brand or a product is being repeatedly shown, so that its impact on the masses could be seen. And during the times of globalization, we also see that the arrival of so many production houses, with the coming of the multiplexes, and with these multiplexes and the production houses, we find that there were changes in the exhibition, the way films they were being exhibited. And some films with low budget could also be made, because now multiplexes with the capacity of 100, 150 made it possible to make low budget cinema, because in one big multiplex we will have 4 to 5 screens, where with small auditoriums films could be exhibited. Now you did not have big screens of 1000 and 1200 and 1500 where film will not be able to sustain. So the films on target audience, films based on target audiences could also be made. We also find that there was also a market for the animation, and how in the animation sector mythology was also being shown. Films like Bal Ganesh, Shri Krishna, they were also being made, and there were other films like Chota Bheem, Tenali Ram. All this kind of cinema was also being made. So when we tend to understand that how cinema is to be seen in India, how it is reflective of the Indian culture, and Indian cinema industry is one of the largest film industries of the world in terms of the films which are being made. And in India, when you tend to understand, we see that films, they are being made in so many languages. They are not only made in Hindi, but they are made in so many other languages as well, be it Marathi, be it Bengali cinema, or South Indian, you have Telugu, Tamil, Kannada. So all industries which are thriving, and the way the films they are being produced, that is also enormous. And we also find that with the kind of changes which have come in the recent times, with the coming of the OTT platform, the way various kinds of OTT platforms, they are purchasing the films, and they are showing those films on that particular kind of a platform. Many of the films are not getting even released on the screens, so films are made for that. And with the arrival of the technology, we find that the way handheld cameras and cheaper cameras have come nowadays, competitions are also being held with regard to films which are made with the mobile phones as well. So this kind of a development which is happening is a kind of a monumental journey with regard to the Indian cinema, and the journey continues even now. So with this, I would like to end the discussion. Thank you very much.
Welcome to Gurukul Lectures. In the ongoing series of leadership and team development, today we will be talking on team building and effectiveness. Let me start with a quote given by Henry Ford. Togetherness is a beginning, togetherness is a progress, and togetherness is a success. With this note, let me start with the concept of what is a group. A group is a collection of the people who interact with one another, accept the rights and obligations as the members. For example, preparation group. Why do we form groups? Because we have certain needs. For the need satisfaction, we feel attracted to some people, and we have certain set goals we need to achieve. So because of these three reasons, mainly and primarily because of the need satisfaction, attraction and goals, we form the groups. What is a role in a group? There are basically three roles which we talk about: task oriented roles, maintenance roles, and individual roles. These are the characteristics of a group: the composition, the status hierarchy, the roles, norms, leadership and cohesiveness. These are the particular characteristics of a group. That group is composed of certain people. People are there in certain hierarchy status. Some people are upper in hierarchy, some people are lower in hierarchy. They have certain roles to play in the organization and modern contemporary organizations. There are certain group norms which we need to follow, and there is a leader of the group which is called as a leadership or a steering member. Then we have certain concepts called cohesiveness, that is the degree to which the people are attached to each other and they actually listen to each other as far as the decision making is concerned. Now there is a vital difference between the group and the teams. The group and the teams are not the same. The group means what? There are two or more individuals interacting with each other to accomplish a particular goal, whereas team is all about the mature group with the member, interdependence and motivation to achieve a common goal. So team starts out as a group, but not all groups mature into the teams. Now let us compare the work teams and the work groups. So in the middle of the slide, we have the basis of differentiation. On the left hand side, we have the work teams, and on the right hand side, we have the work groups. So on the basis of goals, if you talk about the work teams, we have a collective performance, whereas in the work groups, we have a shared information. In case of a synergy as a basis of difference, we have a positivity as far as the work team are concerned, and the synergy is all about neutrality if you talk about the work groups. In terms of accountability, we have the individual and the mutual accountability in the work teams, whereas it is specifically individual in the work group. As far as the skill factor is concerned, they are complementary, whereas in case of the work groups, they are random and varied. So these were the particular differences between the work and the team and the groups and the overall functioning of the teams. As far as the groups are concerned, they run the efficient meetings, whereas in the teams, we have to encourage an open-ended discussions and active problem-solving meetings. Now, let us talk about the measure their effectiveness. In case of the teams, the measure performance directly by indirectly by their influence on assessing the collective work output, and the others, that is the financial performance of a business and the promotion, etc. So let us start with the concept of a team. A team is a group of people who do the collective work and are mutually committed to a common team purpose and challenging goals related to that purpose. And the collective work and the mutual commitment are the key characteristics of a team. They not only think and act collectively, but the social and the emotional bonds among them are really compelling. Now let us talk about what does the work team means. Work team is a formal group made up of independent individuals who are responsible for the attainment of a goal. The work teams are popular in the organizations. Now these are the particular reasons because of which the work teams are popular. It creates esprit de corps, that is, union is strength. It allows the member to do more strategic information. It increases the flexibility. It takes into account the advantage of a workforce diversity, because when you talk about a team, you have the people across India, across the globe. So, because of this diversity, it makes the business sense, and it increases the performance because we have people from diverse backgrounds with diverse skills, etc. So, overall, the teams are popular because it builds the team, it builds the work, it builds the environment, it builds the flexibility, performance, and union is strength. So, owing to these reasons, we say that the work teams are very popular. Now, let us talk about the types of teams. There is a purpose, structure, membership, and duration. Because of the various reasons, because of the various purpose, structure, duration, and membership, we have the different categorization of the various team members. So, first is your purpose. We can have a team related to product development, problem solving, re-engineering, any other organizational purposes which are desired in the organization. If you talk about a structure as the basis, we have a supervised team as well as a self-managed team. And in case of a duration, we can have a permanent and a temporary team. And in case of membership, either we have a functional membership or we have a cross-functional membership. So, let us take these one by one. Now, team based on ownership. So, we have the functional teams and we have the cross-functional teams. So, let us have a detail of all the two. Now, in case of the functional teams, it is composed of a manager or his or her employees from only one functional areas. Issues of authority, decision making and leadership are relatively simple and clear, and it attempts to solve the problems in a very specific functional area. And then we have a cross-functional teams. The members come from different functional areas, hybrid grouping of individuals who are experts in the various specialties. Now, we have a team based on the structure. On the basis of the team based structure, we have two types of teams, the supervised team as well as a self-managed team. The supervised team is under the direction of a manager, whereas a self-managed team operate without a manager. They are responsible for a complete work progress or a segment and assumes the responsibility of managing itself. So, have the authority to make and implement the decisions, finish the projects and address the problems and the organizational plans to expand their use in the future. Now, let us talk about what the virtual team means. The physically dispersed members are linked by the computer technology, miss the normal give and take or face-to-face discussions, and they tend to be actually more task oriented. So, if the employees haven't yet learned to function as a team, your workplace may be lacking a very key component. So, teams are so vital for the functioning of the organization. The employees that support one another and recognize the value of each other positions on the team are more motivated and productive. And of course, building a successful team is a process that takes time and cannot be completed in a single day or a week. And when your organization embraces the ideals of collaboration, they will become more cohesive, more cooperative, more effective, and despite the fact it will take a lot of effort. So, how to turn a work group into an effective team? This is a big question mark. So, we will deliberate on this particular issue. The first is convene with the group and explain how the working as a team will increase the motivation level, contentment and productivity for all the members. Inquire of the team members for suggestions on how to improve the group performance. Then the second is, explain how the work you conduct benefit the firm to the group. Explain what each person position is in that group. While this may appear to be a self-evident, and certain members of the group may be unaware of the scope of another team member's responsibility or the value of your job to the organization. Coming on to the third strategy, that is how to turn a work group into an effective team. The third and the foremost factor is, as a group, develop a number of objectives. The goals could include completing a critical project ahead of the schedule, improving the member communications, and increasing the revenue by a specific percentage. Establish the success measures and make them available to all the team members. The goals which you have set should be very specific, quantifiable, realistic, relevant, and time-bound, and according to the free management library website. Then is you have to determine how the group will achieve the objectives, and if you are worried about missing a deadline, look at your workflow and redesign it with your team's inputs. To boost the communication, schedule the weekly meetings with them. Use the workplace intranet to provide the project updates or organize a casual lunch and learn the lessons. The next is keep your team members up to date on the grounds and the group's progress towards its objectives. So, you need to provide a regular feedback and request the team members to keep you updated on your issues and concerns, and provide the answers to the challenging situations and act as go-between if there are disagreements between the departments or the personnels. The next most important point is to encourage the team members to collaborate in order to achieve their objectives. The team members with diverse strengths should be paired together so that they can benefit from each other's knowledge as well as experience. So, we are discussing basically the factors which can actually turn around the team and increase the productivity. In this flow, let us talk about the seventh factor. Celebrate your team's accomplishments and explain how each member contributed to their achievement. Thank you to everyone on the team to show your appreciation, gratitude for their particular efforts. Take the group out for lunch or offer them some gift cards. Actually, this kind of an appreciation environment is actually going to change the scenario. People will be more motivated, they will be more involved, engaged, and thankful to be a part of that team. And if the team leader appreciates them by some gifts, by some lunches and dinners and taking outs and outings, they will be elevated to next level. So, celebrate your team's accomplishments. It will make a difference. Now, let us talk about the team evolution curve. Now, this is a very, very important curve and has a significant meaning. The team evolution curve is a facilitated discussion you can use with your team about where they are now and where they need to go and evolve. So, if your goal is to become a high performing team, then this tool will actually going to help you and get there by helping the participants see what it is they need to improve. So, let us see this particular curve. You need to start with the work group, then we have a pseudo team, then we have a potential team, the real team, and the high performing team. On the right hand side we have the time, and on the left hand side we have the performance. So, let us see and explain this curve so that the team performance becomes better. The working group characteristics, there is no major incremental performance requirement or the opportunity that would necessitate the formation of a team. The working group characteristics. The members generally communicate to share the information, the best practices and the opinions, and as well as to make the decisions that will help each individual perform better within his or her area of responsibility. So, there is no demand for a team approach or for a mutual accountability. This next is your pseudo team characteristics. This is a group from whom there may be a considerable increment performance, demand or a potential, but it has not prioritized or attempted to attain a collective performance. Even though it calls itself a team, it has a little interest in forming a shared purpose or set of a performance goals. And in terms of the performance impact, the pseudo teams are the poorest of all the groups. The potential of the individual pieces is smaller than the sum of the whole in the pseudo teams, and because their interactions detract from each member individual performance without generating any joint benefits. So, they virtually invariably contribute less to the business performance and needs than the working groups. The pseudo team characteristics. To have the option of becoming a potential team, a pseudo team must set the goals so that it has something very specific to do as a group, and of course, that is very beneficial to the team and to the firm. Now, coming on to the potential team characteristics. There is a considerable increment performance requirement, and it is genuinely attempting to enhance its impact on the performance, and more clarity regarding the aim, goals or the work products, and is usually required, as well as more discipline in hammering out a consistent working method. It hasn't yet built a system of collective responsibility. The organizations are full of potential teams, and when a team approach is appropriate, the performance impact can be very significant. And between a potential team and a genuine team, the performance increase is the steepest, yet any progress up to the slope is actually worthwhile. Now, let us move on to a real team characteristics. This is a small group of people with complementary skills who are equally devoted to a common purpose, set of goals and the method of working for which they are both held accountable. The real teams are the most fundamental unit of performance, and the real team potential performance impact is much more than the team group and the working group. Then we have our high performing team characteristics. This is a group that satisfies all the requirement for the actual team, and as well as having a member who are deeply invested in one another personal growth and success. This dedication frequently extends beyond the squad, and the high performing team exceeds all other similar teams as well as all reasonable expectations given its composition. Now, tool of team building is a group decision making analysis. The group decision making analysis is a team building activity that allows the team members to talk about and agree on how they can make the better judgments by utilizing the right decision making style for a particular situation. And unlike many of the other tools and the strategies, it concentrates on improving only the essential process, that is, how to make better judgments. For example, template for group decision making. Now we can see on the screen, this particular slides really tells us a very good thing about how we can take decisions. So on the right hand side is desirable, on the left hand side is not desirable. Like we have a lack of response and we have also a lack of response. So we can see the scale of 0 to 100%, and you can see on the right hand side the overall authority role is decreasing and the minority role is increasing. So, how we should take decisions and how we take decisions are differentiated in this particular slide, and it actually clearly states that we should give more priority to the minority section, and of course we have to reduce the autocratic set of taking of the decision making, which is definitely not desirable at all. So, there is a secret sauce for effective decision making. So, let me give you a recipe of that. If you have a large group, you might want to form a smaller breakout groups of 4 for a discussion to see if they can achieve a mini consensus beyond and before bringing the whole group back together. So, this particular concept means what? That means if you have a group of 20 people, try and break the people in a group of 4 or 5 and try to build a consensus. And if you have a mini consensus, of course, sky is the limit for you, and you will have a very, very effective decision making process. So, this is a secret sauce which we must share it with everyone. Now, let us discuss about what are the effective teams. A good working definition of a team is a smaller number of people with complementary skills who are committed to a common purpose, performance goals, and approach for which they hold themselves mutually accountable. And high performance teams add tremendous value to the organizations. Nurturing and developing them aid efficiency and maximize the effectiveness and the flexibility of individuals and the organization. So, let us quickly discuss the characteristics of a successful team. The first and the foremost is a shared sense of mission, a thorough awareness of team goals, resources required to achieve such goals, and the mutual respect among the team members. So, both for who they are as individuals and for what they contribute to the team success. Valuing and accepting the members, strengthen the weaknesses, the mutual trust is definitely essential, and the willingness to share one's expertise and the knowledge, and there is an openness to speak freely. So, as we move on to the characteristics of an effective team, it is very clear from the features itself that the particular effective teams are free and they feel they are connected and they have a shared mission, shared goals, and of course they contribute to the team success in some way or the other without breaking or having a division between themselves. They value each and every member of the team, and of course the mutual trust is the most essential feature of an effective team. And of course, they are willing to share one's expertise and the knowledge, and there is an openness to speak freely whatever they want to tell, whatever they want to share. And of course, to deal efficiently with all the team tasks, the individuals must have a diverse set of skills. So, the effective team features are definitely any feature which every successful team aspires for. Welcome to Gurukul Lectures. In the ongoing series of Team Leadership and Development, we will be talking on team building and other related issues. Now, there are some very important characteristics of a successful team, like we need to value each other, we need to have a mutual trust, people are willing to do the work to the best possible extent, they have the expertise, they have a shared vision, and they have an open environment wherein they can speak successfully and in order to build the best relationships. So, the characteristics of the successful team is one which everyone is striving for and everyone is trying to achieve and maintain the kind of relationship what the successful team characteristics has. To ideal efficiently with all the team tasks, individuals must have a diverse set of skills, and for many positions required to complete a team's task, a variety of personal styles are also required. The individual and the group accountability. Each team member accepts the responsibility for both his or her own work and the team's work. The members of the squad announcing their intentions and then following through. We need to create certain team values. So let us discuss on this. The teams that perform well contribute a lot of value to the business, and it is well worth the time and effort to nurture and grow them. And when there are organizational leadership, they have a substantial impact on the general culture. More than all the plans and the performance-oriented banners, people acquire their best cues about the behavior that are very crucial to the organization's success by watching their leaders in action. Effective teams usually have the following characteristics, and they focus on the worthwhile goals and define the achievement targets. Have a strong sense of self as well as the specific and essential task within a team, and are a part of the network with the strong communication and teamwork abilities. We have a mutual supportive atmosphere for resolving the conflicts and the self-development, which is commonly embodied in either an explicit or an implicit set of principles. We need to take a pleasure in the activity as evidenced by inventiveness and the sense of humor. Now, teams typically spend a lot of time on the planning, linking the team goals to the department and the organization's vision and plan. The good teams also meet regularly to discuss the progress and also take out time to reflect on their processes and how they interconnect as possible. So, the team values can effectively provide a team's minimum standard of acceptable behavior and the performance on the job. All the team should strive to have an established value that are very consistent with the core values of the organization. These defined standards can become the foundation for the team's overall success and the focal point for a daily behavior. The challenge is coming up with a set of values that are more motherhood and apple pie, and that the team really buy into. So, it's a biggest challenge to take out the team beyond the motherhood and the apple pie. And typically, this value system like ability to learn, encouraging the initiative, integrity, mutual respect, open communication, and fun, for example, need the values defining in terms of what they mean actually in practice. So, the practicalities of creating the team values and the pitfalls to avoid when identifying the team values, which are given by Jess Lynn Stoner. It's a case study which outlines the 5 cautionary mistakes to avoid when you are determining the team values. The first is, a member of a leadership team advised that we figure out what our values are, and because no one had a time for an extra meeting to accomplish this task, the task was delegated to few volunteers to bring back to the leadership team. The blunder is to separate the values from the actual work, and the leaders delegated and stepped back. So they would have discovered how these values drive the very behavior they need to do the work, and if they had taken the time as a team to debate the values they considered were vital to their future. So the practitioner of the creating team values and the pitfalls to avoid when identifying the team values, the second point is the subgroup members. They realized that doing the task in isolation was not at all a smart idea. So in order to be inclusive, they sent out a poll to everyone in the organization. So the stumbling block is a lack of a dialogue, the values, and become more than words on the papers. Only through participation and debate, and where the people fully understand them and commit to embodying them. The third factor is participants were asked to list their top 5 values in a survey instructions, and there was no mission statement attached. So the majority of the participants were asked to list their own personal values, and some people chose the values that they even did not think were being lived right now. Some people did not identify the values like honesty, and because they felt they were givens, so there are few people chose the values they thought were the most important to the organization's mission. The failure to link the values to the purpose or the vision is a very common problem, owing to which there is a substantial difference as far as the negative spillover is concerned on the production. The organizational values must be more than a reflection of its members' individual personal ideals. And because the values influence the behavior and the decision-making process, selecting the values that will guide the company into the future is extremely critical, and simply recognizing the value that exists now defines where you are, but they are not necessarily the values that will assist you in getting where you want to go. The subgroup had a vibrant and exciting discussions where they discussed the poll results and expressed their own perspective on what values were important. Honesty, relationship, teamwork, profitability, and enthusiasm were chosen as the top 5 values. The failure to be descriptive is a pitfall. To various people, words have varied meanings. For each of these words, it is critical to provide a precise definition as well as the examples of what the actions look like. The next is the subgroup reported their findings at the following leadership team meeting, and they praised for their effort and commended on their accomplishments. So the leaders believed the mission had been accomplished and completed, and no further discussions were had on the matter. The figures were made public and made available on the internet. So nothing has changed as a result of this action, and the leaders would have to look them up if you ask them what values are now. So the stumbling block is a lack of responsibility, and there was no procedure in place to track whether the values were being modeled by the leaders or lived throughout the company, and to assist in the resolution of the value conflicts or to give repercussions for a major violations. Without responsibility, identifying values becomes merely a list checking exercise rather than a guiding force in your firm. So people talk about forming a team, working as a team, and my team in every workplace, but only few understand how to create a teamwork experience or develop an effective team. In the broader sense, belonging to a team is the outcome of feeling a part of something bigger than your own self, and it has a lot to do how well you understand your organization's mission or goals. You contribute to the organization's overall performance in a team-oriented atmosphere. And to achieve these outcomes, you collaborate with the other members of the company. Even if you have a certain job function and are a member of a specific department, you work together with other employees of the organization to achieve the overall goals, and your actions are guided by the broader picture, and your role exists to help a bigger picture. You must distinguish this particular general idea of collaboration with the difficulty of forming an effective, intact team to achieve a specific goal. Many people mix up the two goals of team building, and that is why so many team development seminars, meetings, retreats and activities are regarded a failure by those who attend them. So the leaders are unable to specify the type of team they wished to assemble. And when it comes to the team building tactics, developing an overall sense of teamwork differs from forming an effective and a focused work team. When distributing the team duties, it's very critical to concentrate on the team members' specific strengths. It is going to make a specific difference. And it's not so much about having the finest person for each function. It is about fostering a culture of success and achievement. When each team member has a role that they excel at, they are more likely to feel appreciated and emit a positive energy to rest of the team. On the other hand, if people are assigned to the role that they do not suit them or help them to activate and achieve the positive goals, the frustration and resentment can develop within the team. And it's critical that the team management does not start favoring certain team members by continually assigning them the essential job and duties. Yes, you need to allow the members to take an initiative. Instead, you should encourage all the team members to take all the type of risk and take on the new challenges. You need to allow the members to take the initiative. Asking for the volunteers for the role is a very smart approach to do this. Instead of declaring that a person A is responsible for a specific task, inform the team that you require someone for a specific task. Encourage the team more quiet members to take a lead, and if the same people are continuously stepping up. Another technique to involve everyone is to make sure that each team member reviews the project and the choices before they have finalized. So have each person submit a short feedback in this regard before the materials or the plans are finalized. So if they are reviewing the projects, they are giving their choices before the things are finalized, that means you are trying to engage each and everyone towards the team performance and achievement. You have to concentrate another strategy on the positive remarks. The comments can help promote a teamwork, but the emphasis should always be on a good rather than a negative feedback. A healthy feedback is another effective method for fostering a very positive work environment and ensuring that everyone feels valued. So if people are giving you the positive comments, so concentrate on that. The negative comments are only for the reforms and for the some kind of a checkups. But yes, everything which is going to work is only the positivity, and the remarks which are only positive should be taken into consideration and should be concentrated upon. Individual evaluation sessions with the team members are very beneficial, but providing a relevant feedback to the entire team is also beneficial. you can enhance the team's morale by emphasizing the importance of team overall performance as well as the individual contributions. You need to improve the communication. It is definitely very essential activity. The following suggestions will help you enhancing your team communications with one another. Communication is the heart of teamwork and it should be one of the team main priority areas. And of course, you have to maintain an open door policy. The team and the organization management must maintain an open door policy. You need the members of your team to feel comfortable communicating the issues or the positive developments at any moment. Allowing all types of inquiries and suggestions from the team that can help you as far as the open policy is concerned. The management should always pay attention to these questions and reply constructively. If a recommendation isn't feasible, for example, don't just state it won't be done. Instead, explain why and thank the person who suggested it. It is an open door policy. The person was initiating giving a comment, giving a suggestion. It should be taken in a right stride. Why that suggestion should not be taken should also be taken in a right stride. You need to explain why the suggestion was taken. You also need to explain why the suggestion was not taken. You actually need to highlight and thank that particular person who highlighted that particular issue. It is going to make a substantial difference as far as the team building is concerned. When a team member has a problem, whether it's with the project or it is with their personal life, make sure the rest of the team is there to help. He should have such kind of a feeling that people are available at his beck and call. He should be, into a very cozy environment wherein only the positive vibes are coming and he's under a very positive environment, having this kind of a feeling that if the problem comes, everyone is here for me, and of course, he is in a position of a trust, confidence and a fiduciary position. So this can be accomplished by lowering the person's workload or giving a greater out of work assessment and assistance. So of course, if you are going out and having an open door policy, make sure everyone has a liberty to speak, and of course, if the suggestions are not taken care of, then you need to suggest the reason also. And when a team member has a problem, he should have this kind of a feeling that he is having a very cozy environment where everyone is available for his help, and this can be accomplished by lowering the person's workload. So we should not be overloading an individual as far as the working conditions are concerned. He should be comfortable with such a work environment so that there is no stress on his mind that he has to do so much of a work. So some kind of an assistance, some kind of volunteering activity by somebody is a welcome step. Another part under which you can help and make a team building is a brainstorming. It should be encouraged. Throughout the project, the team should be encouraged to brainstorm at various moments. A brainstorming session once a week or every 2 weeks, for example, is a very fantastic idea. You need to ensure that all the ideas are welcome and considered during a meeting. And when it comes to the ideas, the team should look outside the box and be analytical. Crazy ideas should not be dismissed or ridiculed. You may build trust among the group and ignite the ideas that could lead to success by listening to everyone's ideas. It's a good idea to switch the locations to give the group a new challenge, to get everyone into a different thinking mode. Don't only meet in a conference room, go outside the office, sit in a bustling cafe, go into a restaurant, go into a cafe home, etc. this is going to make the environment different. And of course, when you change the environment, your thinking mode, your moods, your comprehension level, your contemplation level, everything goes a sea change. So it's always better to change the environment, because if they are used to only sitting into a conference room, thinking about it, having discussion in the same room, it is not going to make a substantial difference. So this is empirically proved that if you change the locations, and the ideas will also change, the new challenges will come up, people will have a new way of thinking. So sitting outside the office anywhere is beneficial, and of course it should be encouraged, and it's tool for team building also. Next is your curiosity should be encouraged. Curiosity is a crucial component of a successful team. The members should go outside the team for the ideas, as well as the MIT demonstrated. Curiosity about seeking solutions should therefore be encouraged at all the times. Encourage the team members to ask the questions and seek the answers to pick their interest. Remove the phrase, "That's a dumb question," from the team members. Every question is deserving a response. So having a curiosity, having a question hour session, moving on to, deeply into curiosity about seeking the solutions, it is all very encouraging for a team. And of course, no idea is a dumb idea. No question is a dumb question. Every question which is being asked in the discussion actually deserves a response. So that should be kept in mind. So you need to encourage the team members outside the workplace. Finally, strengthen the communication by encouraging the team to spend time together outside of the work. Knowing each team member social side can really help develop the trust and reduce the barriers to asking the queries, coming up with the fresh ideas. Begin by encouraging everyone on the team to eat lunch together. Create unique takeout options in a meeting room. Organize the picnics and throughout the warmer months to do so. So basically, when you talk about strengthening of the team, encouragement of the team outside the workplace, meeting people outside the conference room, having a social side brighten like a sun should be encouraged. So from the official side, you can arrange the and informal meetings also, like a picnic can be arranged by the office, which is formal otherwise and otherwise informal, wherein people can sit together, they can spend time together, and they can exchange some good ideas, they can talk to each other. So this will actually help in building the trust and the confidence amongst the member. So the kind of barriers you were looking for, the people were reluctant to speak and they had a lot of inquiries, but because of some inhibitions they could not speak. So all these things will automatically change into a very positive atmosphere. So you need to encourage everyone on the team to eat lunch together, to meet out for picnics, and especially in the winters, sitting in the sun together, chit-chatting, etc. It is actually going to make a substantial difference for the team building as a strategy. You will also need to plan events outside the workplace. These don't even have to be face-to-face meetings. Instead, they might be an online opportunity to converse. So use a social media to link the team and the instant messaging platforms like Snapchat to improve outside of the work cooperation. So use of the social media is encouraged because people of today, they are more on the social media. So connecting your official work with the social media is also very, very encouraging for the team building. I mean, not meeting online, offline, but meeting online through social media is also a very, very welcome and a good strategy for a team building. Then is your accountability should be easily accessible. A set of rules is required for effective teamwork. Accountability among the team members is very critical because it encourages the negative conduct and fosters the trust. So, you need to define each member's responsibility. Outline the role of each member is the first step towards increased accountability. Everyone should be aware of the team's main aim, but they should also be given their own set of objectives and the particular task. The team will face less uncertainty and trending on each other's toes if the roles are well defined. As previously discussed, you want to use each team member's strength for the benefit of the entire group. We need to assign some assignments based on their particular skills and make sure that everyone in the team understands their responsibilities before the team project begins. And throughout the process, review, reassign is of course a strategy which is extremely important and needed, and to make sure that everyone's participation is valued equally. The necessity of identifying the objectives both for the team as a whole and for the individual members was briefly highlighted, and it is critical that all the members are informed of these kind of expectations from the very beginning. So, you need to describe the expectations in detail for the entire staff members, so there is a clarity that what they are supposed to do. Before beginning the project, the team should gather and write the expected results as well as the behaviors that will aid in achieving them and the goals that must be met. So, it is important to note that the team is involved in the process and that it is not merely a top-down management decision. Make precise timelines and keep a record of the progress. So, the team should have a clear understanding of the schedule, have a timeline with the similar objectives, and can be extremely beneficial and ensuring that team is not overburdened, and make a precise concept of the progress also. So, a proper review mechanism must also be in place to guarantee that the team or the individual members do not fall behind. And of course, you have to make sure that team members don't feel like they are being followed, but make sure the management is aware of their progress. The self-assessment questionnaires or feedback session can also be very important in this regard. And overall, you can also create a routine. So, having a routine of something is also a welcome step and is, a very important part of a teamwork. The routine for problem solving and debates should be established, and furthermore, the team should have a procedure in place for dealing with the members of the team who behave in an unfavorable or a destructive manner. If someone isn't doing their part or there are bullying concerns, it's very critical to establish a routine for dealing with such situations. So, all these steps which we have discussed will pave a long way in team building and development.